And one of the reasons that we're going to take some time to talk about web servers is they are probably one of the more frequently attacked systems on any company's network. Because of their nature, they really lend themselves well to hackers because they're out on the internet and there's so many different variables associated with them, it's very difficult to lock down. And because there are vulnerabilities across all platforms of web servers, including IIS, Apache, and Tomcat, it definitely makes for a great target. Another thing that actually increases the risk of being hacked for web servers is that they're connected to the internet. In most cases, there's an open channel between the hacker and the particular server, so there's no firewalls, no intrusion detection system to worry about. It's just a great target. In some scenarios, these web servers may be protected by external firewalls or a DMZ style setup, but even then, you're associated with the problem that anonymous users need to make requests to this server in various directories on port 80, which means there's only so much you can do to prevent access from hackers because you don't know the user from the hacker. So this is a good example of you're putting yourself out there, you're in a vulnerable situation because you're allowing anonymous access to your system at many levels on port 80. So this is almost one of those setups that's just doomed to fail. And we've mentioned also here that it's easier to exploit these guys due to poor security, and I want to elaborate on that for a minute. What that basically is going to mean is that there are so many different things involved in setting up a website, and I'm just going to walk through a standard IIS setup. First of all, you've got local file system privileges. You've got operating system security. You've got the configuration of the account that IIS runs under. You've got the IIS service itself and associated virtual directories. You have to deal with whatever code you're running IIS with. Let's take PHP for example. So you've got to deal with the versioning and the patching associated with PHP and its configuration. And then you have to deal with the application that PHP and IIS host and its associated patching and vulnerabilities and its associated permissions inside the application, as well as the back-end database that application is potentially interfacing with. I'll go ahead and stop there, but I could go on for quite a while. So the reason I'm bringing that up is to point out the fact that web servers are such a very complex animal that it is extremely difficult to have a well locked down web server in any type of environment. So keep in mind that web servers are usually targeted and successfully hacked simply because most systems admins or web server managers, they don't have the skills and the understanding to lock down every aspect of that site. So all the hacker has to do is assess that web server and find out where the weaknesses are, whether it's in database permissions, application permissions, or vulnerabilities that exist in various versions of software. But again, it's such a complex environment, it's very difficult to protect. So we're going to go over some common web server vulnerabilities that exist out there. Passwords stored in website code. Although this isn't the most common thing in the world, I did a job for a lawyer's office a while back, and they had it set up so that clients could see the case status on their website. And basically you would go to the site and it would prompt you for a username and password authentication. You type in your username, you type in your password, and it would let you in if you authenticated properly. So the authentication part actually worked pretty well. The problem is the authentication application was checking a URL that ultimately led me to a plain text file where the passwords were stored. So I could simply go read that file and go find all of their clients and go look at the status for all the cases for every client in that lawyer's office. So that's a pretty big vulnerability that was created by whoever wrote the code for that particular software application. So that's a great example of passwords being stored in the code on sites. Another huge one that came out with Windows 2000 is the ability to traverse directories. It was called a Unicode attack. And basically it allowed us to go into any directory on the system as long as it was on the same physical drive as the website itself. Ability to execute scripts or programs. There are actually dozens of default scripts and programs that come with a default installation of Apache, Tomcat, and IIS. A lot of administrators don't know or choose not to remove those scripts or programs. So if permissions aren't set up correctly, I can execute those scripts on the remote system. Ability to bypass URL checking. What this basically means is I want to run the command.exe file on the web server. Well, there should be mechanisms put in place that prevent me from doing that. But oftentimes, the URL checking is flawed or not configured correctly, and it will allow me to actually run arbitrary code on those remote systems. Another very common one is improperly patched and configured servers. Now, this can actually apply across the board, but what I'm specifically focusing on is the improperly patched. Remember all the different software versions I kind of laid out for you earlier? Well, every one of those has vulnerabilities and needs to be patched. It only takes one subsystem to be missed in the patching process, and you've created a major vulnerability for yourself. Now, once we actually go through and determine the exploits and actually exploit them, we can gain all kinds of different things. Root access is definitely kind of the holy grail of hacking because we now have root access to the system. So website defacement is something that's actually commonly done by script kiddies who generally just take a tool and run that tool against every web server on the internet until they find one. They hack it, they put their name out there, they holler a message, and then they walk away from it. They don't actually do any real hacking. It's more just for publicity. Denial of service can definitely exist in those vulnerabilities. Theft or alteration of data on server. This is actually a very common thing. Hackers are looking to get data. That's our ultimate goal here. For the most part, we're looking to get information that's not normally accessible. Well, if I can actually extract your database records through the vulnerabilities in your web application, that's going to get me what I'm looking for. And depending on the skill and the desire of the hacker, further penetration deeper into that network is definitely going to be one of our goals as well. So as you can see, web servers, as complex as they are, provide a great place for hackers to start when penetration testing a network.